People love to say the past is over. They say it like a door has been closed, like history knows how to stay in its own room, like old names, old feelings, and old mistakes cannot find their way back into a marriage that took 23 years to build. But that is not always how it works. Sometimes the past does not knock. Sometimes it does not beg. Sometimes it does not even need to sneak in. Sometimes your husband leaves it a key. Marianne Brooks learned that on a quiet Tuesday morning at 6:12. She was standing in her kitchen, making coffee the way she had made it for years. The house was still half asleep. Her son Evan was upstairs. Daniel's mug was sitting near the sink, still warm from the coffee he had taken before leaving for work. Then the printer in the little home office clicked on. Marianne froze for a second. No one had touched it. No one was in that room. A page slid out, slow and ordinary, like it was printing a grocery list or an insurance form. But when Marianne picked it up, she saw the kind of words no wife expects to see in her own house. Post-separation budget. Daniel and Claire. Claire was not Daniel's coworker. She was not a client. She was not some harmless woman from a group text. Claire Whitman was Daniel's ex. And still, Claire's name was not the part that made Marianne's fingers go cold. It was the last line on the page. Move marital savings before filing. Reduce child support exposure. That was when Marianne understood something her heart had been trying to warn her about for months. This was not just a secret conversation. This was not just coffee. This was not even just another woman. This was a plan. And if you have ever been told you are insecure for noticing the truth too early, stay with this story. Subscribe for more stories about betrayal, divorce, custody battles, and the quiet kind of justice that only comes when someone finally stops begging a liar to be honest. Because Daniel had not made a mistake. He had been rehearsing the end of his marriage before Marianne even knew she was standing on the stage. Before that page ever came out of the printer.
Marianne thought she understood the shape of her life.
She was 52 years old. She had been married to Daniel Brooks for 23 years. That is long enough to know a man's footsteps before he turns the corner. Long enough to know which silence means he is tired, and which silence means he is hiding something. Long enough to build a life that does not look perfect in pictures, but still has roots. They had a mortgage. They had a son. They had a shared calendar, old tax folders, family passwords, weekend routines, and a freezer full of meals Marianne cooked on Sundays, because weekdays never seemed to slow down. Marianne was not some flawless woman floating through life with perfect hair and perfect patience. She was real. She got tired. She got quiet when she should have spoken sooner. Some nights, she let Daniel win an argument simply because she did not have the energy to pay for another one. After work, bills, dinner, laundry, school emails, and the weight of being the person everyone counted on, fighting felt like an extra charge she could not afford. But Marianne was steady. That was her gift. And maybe, for a long time, that was also how Daniel learned to take her for granted. She was the one who remembered when the insurance renewed. She knew which pharmacy carried Evan's allergy medication. She knew when the property tax bill was due. She knew which baseball practices had been moved indoors because of rain. She knew which teacher preferred emails before 3 in the afternoon, and which doctor's office always needed a reminder call before sending records. Daniel worked as an operations manager for a small logistics company. It was not flashy work, but it paid well enough. Marianne worked part-time as a bookkeeper for a dental clinic, balancing patient accounts and cleaning up numbers other people had left messy. Between the two of them, they had built a normal life. Not rich, not dramatic, just stable. They paid the mortgage together. They sat on cold bleachers and watched Evan play baseball. They talked about college savings even when the numbers made them nervous. They argued about small things, like the thermostat, the grocery budget, and whether Daniel really needed to leave every pair of shoes beside the garage door. When Daniel's mother got sick, Marianne became the person everyone quietly expected to handle it. She scheduled the appointments. She filled the pill organizer. She drove to the pharmacy. She sat through long afternoons in waiting rooms while Daniel texted that work had gotten complicated again. Nobody called that sacrifice. They called it Marianne being Marianne. And that was the marriage she believed she had. ordinary, a little worn down at the edges, but real. Claire Whitman belonged to a different time. At least, that was what Daniel had always said. Claire was his ex from before Marianne. Old history. An old chapter. The kind of name a husband mentioned once in a while with a shrug, as if even remembering it took effort. Marianne had never been the jealous type. She did not believe every old relationship had to be treated like a crime scene. People had pasts. She had one too. By 52, most people carry a few old stories around with them. That was not the problem. The problem was not that the past existed. The problem was when it refused to stay in its place. At first, Daniel only mentioned Claire in small ways. He said she had gotten divorced. Then he said she was lonely. Then she was having a rough time. Then she did not have many people she could really talk to. Marianne listened. She tried to be fair. She tried to be the kind of wife who did not turn compassion into suspicion. At their age, she told herself, adults should know the difference between being kind and opening a door that should have stayed shut. There is a line between helping someone and letting them lean against your marriage. Marianne believed Daniel knew that line. For a while, she wanted to believe it badly enough to ignore how often Claire's name started showing up in their house. At first, Claire was just a name from Daniel's past. Then she became a reason. Then she became an excuse. And excuses, when nobody challenges them, have a way of turning into patterns. The first changes were small. Small enough that Marianne almost felt embarrassed for noticing. Daniel changed the passcode on his phone. He said the company had updated security rules. Maybe they had. Then he started taking his phone into the bathroom. Then he started keeping it face down on the dinner table. Then, when it buzzed, his eyes would move before his hand did. Marianne saw that. She did not say anything at first. That is one thing people do not understand about women like Marianne. They notice long before they speak. They collect tone, timing, pauses. The way a man says a name, the way he suddenly protects a screen he used to leave on the kitchen counter without thinking. At dinner, Daniel began stepping outside to take calls. Work-related, he said. Always work-related, even when his voice dropped lower. Even when the call ended the second Marianne opened the back door and asked if he wanted more coffee. Claire's name became like a pebble in Marianne's shoe. Not enough to make her stop walking. Enough to make every step feel wrong. One evening, Daniel said, she's going through a hard time. He said it like those 6 words should have answered every question Marianne had not even asked yet. Marianne looked up from the sink. What kind of hard time? Daniel gave her that look. Not angry. Worse. Disappointed, as if her question had revealed something small and ugly about her. Do we really have to do this? He said. And there it was, his favorite trick. He did not answer the question. He judged her for asking it. Later, when Marianne told him she was uncomfortable with how often Claire seemed to need him, Daniel leaned back and gave a tired little laugh. You're too old to be acting this insecure. That sentence stayed with her. Not because he shouted it. Daniel rarely shouted. He did not need to. He had learned that quiet cruelty sounds more reasonable. If he kept his voice low, Marianne looked like the emotional one. If he sighed before he spoke, she looked like the problem. Another time, he said, she's my past. You're making this ugly. Then, you always turn basic kindness into betrayal. Every sentence placed the blame back in Marianne's hands. Daniel was not crossing a boundary. Marianne was imagining one. Daniel was not hiding anything. Marianne was too sensitive. Daniel was not letting Claire back into their marriage. Marianne was being suspicious, old-fashioned, and difficult. And then he said the thing that changed the whole temperature of the room. Maybe this is why Evan feels more relaxed with me. Marianne was folding towels at the kitchen table when he said it. Her hands stopped. Evan was 15. Tall, quiet, still caught in that strange place between being a boy and trying to become a man. He did not always talk much, but Marianne knew him. She knew when he needed food, when he needed silence, when he needed someone to sit nearby without making him explain himself. She had been the one keeping his life steady for years. Doctor appointments, school emails, baseball schedules, permission slips, allergy medication, late-night fevers, the hard days after bad grades, the quiet rides home when he did not want advice, only presence. and Daniel had just reached for their son like a weapon. After that, the conversations were not only about Claire anymore. They were about Marianne. Her tone, her mood, her stability, her reactions. Daniel began saying things that sounded casual, that landed like threats. "If we ever split up," he said one night while loading the dishwasher, "I think Evan would want to stay where things are calmer." That was the cruelty of it. He said it while rinsing a plate. Some people break your trust with a slammed door. Others do it gently, in the kitchen, while pretending they are still helping clean up. Marianne did not have proof yet. What she had was behavior. Weak explanations. A husband who made her feel guilty for noticing his distance. A man quietly building a version of her that she did not recognize. A jealous wife. An unstable mother. A woman too emotional to be trusted. And the more she questioned him, the more he used her questions as evidence. That is how gaslighting works. It does not always begin with one huge lie. Sometimes it begins when someone makes you apologize for smelling smoke before they admit there is a fire. Marianne almost believed she was overreacting. Almost. Then one ordinary Thursday afternoon gave her the first real piece of proof. It started with a car insurance bill. Nothing dramatic, nothing romantic. Just a renewal notice that needed to be paid before the end of the week. Daniel had once again claimed he could not remember where he saved it. So Marianne went into the small room they called an office. It was barely an office. Really. Just a desk, a printer, and 2 shelves packed with old tax folders, warranties, and instruction manuals nobody ever read twice. She opened the shared laptop and searched the family email for insurance. That was not what she found. What appeared instead was a confirmation from a cafe 20 minutes away. Table for 2. Daniel Brooks and Claire Whitman. Thursday, 12:30 p.m. For a few seconds, Marianne just sat there. The cursor blinked in the search bar. The house was quiet. That email sat on the screen, like a hand pressed against her chest. Daniel had told her that very morning that he would be eating lunch at his desk. Work was buried, he said. Too much to do. No time to step out. He had kissed Evan on the top of the head, taken his travel mug, and walked out of the house like an honest man. Marianne read the email once. Then again. Then she forwarded a copy to herself, saved the screenshot, and closed the laptop. She did not call him. She did not text, "Where are you?" She did not drive there to make a scene. But she did drive there. She parked across the street from the cafe, with both hands resting on the steering wheel. For 3 full minutes, she felt foolish. She felt like the woman Daniel kept telling her she was. Suspicious. Small. Paranoid. Then, she looked through the window. And there they were. Daniel sat in the back corner with Claire. Claire was not crying. She was not shaking. She was not some broken woman who had no one else in the world. She was smiling, leaning forward, both hands around a white coffee cup, looking comfortable in a way that made Marianne's stomach tighten. Daniel was smiling too. That hurt more than she expected. Not because a smile proved an affair. It did not. But ease proved something. Familiarity proved something. The kind of comfort between them was not the kind that comes from one emergency call. It was not awkward. It was not new. His hand rested on the table near hers. Not touching. Just close enough to make the distance feel chosen. Marianne did not go inside. She did not tap on the glass. She did not give Daniel the scene he would later describe as evidence that she was unstable. Instead, she took one photo of the cafe sign, one photo of the time on her phone, one photo wide enough to show Daniel's car in the parking lot. Then she drove home. That night, Daniel walked into the house and behaved like the day had been ordinary. He kissed Evan on the forehead. He asked about baseball practice. He opened the refrigerator and stared inside like every husband, who thinks dinner appears because the house loves him. "What are we doing for dinner?" he asked. Marianne stood at the stove. She looked at him for a moment before answering. "Where did you eat lunch today?" Daniel did not even pause. "At my desk," he said. "Busy day." And there it was. Not a feeling, not insecurity, not imagination. A clean, simple lie. Marianne stirred the pot once, slowly, and said nothing. Because in that moment, she understood something that would save her later. She did not need to drag the truth out of Daniel. She did not need to beg him to admit what he had done. She needed to stop arguing with a liar and let the record speak for her. That night, after Daniel lied about lunch without even blinking, Marianne barely slept. She lay in bed beside him and listened to him breathe. Slow, steady, comfortable. That was the part that unsettled her most. Not the cafe, not Claire, not even the lie itself. It was the fact that Daniel could carry all of it into their bedroom, lie down beside his wife of 23 years, and sleep like nothing in him had shifted. By morning, Marianne understood something hard. Daniel was not scared of hurting her. He was scared of getting caught. So she stopped asking questions he could turn against her. She stopped giving him chances to rehearse better answers. She stopped leaving little openings for honesty, because Daniel had already shown her what he did with openings. He used them. He widened them. Then he called her insecure for noticing the draft. That morning, Marianne opened her laptop and created a folder. She named it Household Records. Not affair, not divorce, not revenge. Just household records. The name mattered. It kept her grounded. It reminded her that she was not doing something reckless. She was not trying to become the woman Daniel kept accusing her of being. She was not sneaking into his private life. She was organizing her own. And after 23 years of marriage, there was plenty to organize. She started with a joint bank account. The one Daniel used when he wanted to look transparent, and the one he forgot also belonged to her. She downloaded statements month by month. She saved credit card bills. She copied mortgage documents, insurance payments, property tax records, car loan information, and the college fund statements for Evan. It was strange, seeing her marriage arranged in numbers. A payment here, a charge there, a deposit that should have been bigger, a withdrawal that did not match any family expense. For years, had acted like the household finances were too complicated for Marianne to worry about. That was almost funny, in a bitter sort of way, because Marianne had spent half her adult life worrying about the things Daniel called complicated. She knew which bill could wait 3 days and which one could not. She knew when to buy groceries around the mortgage draft. She knew when Evan needed new cleats, and when she could stretch the old ones one more month. She knew how to make a normal life keep standing, even when the numbers leaned the wrong way. So she kept going. After the money came Evan's records. School emails, baseball schedules, doctor appointments, dental visits, parent-teacher conferences, allergy prescriptions, permission slips. The quiet little details that do not look important until someone in court starts asking who actually showed up. And Marianne had showed up. Again and again. She saved the text messages where Daniel said he could not take Evan to practice because of a work emergency. She saved the calendar entries from those same days. She saved the emails from teachers thanking her for coming in. She saved the clinic reminders Daniel had ignored until Marianne called back herself. At first, it felt cold, almost wrong, like she was turning motherhood into evidence. Then she realized Daniel had already done that. He had turned their marriage into a plan, their son into leverage, their money into something to move before filing. Marianne was not destroying the family by keeping records. She was protecting herself from the man who had already started rewriting the story. The first strange withdrawals looked small. $200. Then $400. Cash taken out on Fridays. Little transfers to an account Marianne did not recognize. Not enough to make the bank call. Not enough to scream. Just enough to whisper. Then she opened the credit card history. That was worse. A restaurant 20 minutes from home, a parking garage downtown, a hotel bar Daniel had never mentioned. A florist charge on a Tuesday when no flowers had come to Marianne. Then an apartment complex across town. Marianne sat with that one for a long time. She stared at the charge until the words stopped looking like words. Apartment deposit. Not coffee. Not kindness. Not an old friend having a difficult season. An apartment. She did not cry. By then, crying felt too generous. 3 days later, Marianne sat across from Patricia Grant, a 59-year-old divorce attorney with silver hair, tired eyes, and a voice so calm it almost made the room feel safer. Patricia did not act shocked when Marianne said Claire's name. She did not call Daniel evil. She did not feed Marianne rage just to make her feel understood. She opened a yellow legal pad, uncapped a pen, and asked for dates. That was when Marianne knew she had found the right woman. Some lawyers make betrayal sound like a movie. Patricia made it sound like a file. And that was exactly what Marianne needed. When Marianne finished explaining, Patricia leaned back slightly and folded her hands. According to me, in our state, evidence can matter, she said, but only if it is collected legally. No hacking. No fake passwords. No spyware. No breaking into anything. Marianne nodded. That mattered to her. She did not want to crawl through Daniel's phone in the dark. She did not want to guess passwords. She did not want to do anything that would make the truth look dirty once it reached the judge. Daniel already wanted to paint her as unstable. She would not hand him the brush. Patricia looked over the papers Marianne had brought. You may not need to do anything like that, she said. People who think they are smarter than their spouse usually leave trails in the places they believe nobody will check. Then Patricia asked the question that changed the whole direction of the story. Has he mentioned custody or child support before? Marianne opened her mouth to say no, because Daniel had never sat her down and announced a custody fight. He had never said, plainly, that he was preparing to use Evan against her. But fear has a way of blocking memory. Once Patricia asked the question, the memory started coming back. Evan would probably choose me. You're too emotional lately. I've been the calm parent. Then the sentence that made Patricia stop writing for a second. I don't see why I should pay support if we split time equally. Marianne repeated it softly, almost ashamed she had not understood it sooner. Patricia wrote it down. That was the moment the betrayal changed shape. Claire was still part of it. Of course she was. She was the name, the smile in the cafe, the woman Daniel kept describing as helpless. But Claire was not the whole thing. She was the doorway. Behind her was something colder. A financial strategy. A custody strategy. A plan to make Marianne look unstable, before Marianne even knew she was about to be judged. Patricia gave her simple instructions. Keep documenting what you can legally access. Keep records of Evan's routine. Keep communication in writing whenever possible. Stay calm. Do not threaten Daniel. Do not tell him what you know. Do not give him time to clean up the story. So Marianne went home and became quiet. Not weak quiet. Prepared quiet. There is a difference. Daniel noticed eventually, but not right away. Men like Daniel often notice obedience before they notice pain. As long as dinner was made and towels were clean, and Evan got where he needed to go, Daniel assumed the house was still under control. For a few more days, Marianne played the part he expected. She cooked dinner. She asked Evan about school. She folded laundry. She answered Daniel when he spoke to her, but she stopped giving him extra pieces of herself. No more explanations. No more pleading. No more trying to convince him that a boundary was not an insult. Then Daniel made his next mistake. One evening, after Evan had gone upstairs, Daniel stood in the kitchen and said, I think we should do a DNA test. Marianne looked at him. For a second, the room felt smaller. A DNA test, she repeated. Daniel crossed his arms and wore that careful expression men use when they want cruelty to look reasonable. I just want certainty before anything legal happens. There it was. Anything legal. Not if, before, that one word told Marianne more than Daniel meant to reveal. He was not talking about a possibility. He was preparing for a process. And now he was reaching for Evan's bloodline, as if 15 years of fatherhood could be turned into a math problem. As if their son was not a boy with a history, a bedroom, a baseball glove, and a mother who had sat beside him through fevers and nightmares. Daniel was trying to turn Evan into a discount on future child support. Marianne wanted to say 100 things. She wanted to ask what kind of father needed a lab report before choosing responsibility. She wanted to remind him who had packed lunches, signed forms, stayed up during storms, and held that boy when he was small enough to fit against her chest. She wanted to break, but she remembered Patricia. Stay calm. Let the record speak. So Marianne looked at Daniel and said, Put the request in writing. Daniel blinked. He had expected tears. Maybe shouting. Maybe a scene he could mention later. He did not expect paperwork. The test was done properly. Through the right process. No secret envelopes. No backdoor accusations. No ugly scene in front of Evan. And the result came back exactly as Marianne knew it would. Daniel was Evan's father. Of course he was. But the test did not clear Daniel. Not really. It exposed him. It showed that he was willing to wound his wife, humiliate his son, and question a 15-year family bond if he thought it might help him owe less money. Patricia added the result to the file. Sometimes, she said, a person's request tells the court more than the result. Then came the printer. It happened on another quiet morning, the kind that should have been forgettable. Daniel had already left for work. Evan was still asleep. Marianne was rinsing a coffee cup when the printer in the little office clicked awake. She had not printed anything. One page came out. Then another. Marianne walked toward it slowly, already feeling that familiar cold pressure in her chest. At the top of the first page were the words she would never forget. Post-separation budget Daniel and Claire. She read the title once. Then again. Then she forced herself to read the lines underneath. Projected child support if income is fully counted. Bonus transfer to Brooks Advisory Services. 50-50 custody request to reduce monthly exposure. Claire's apartment deposit. Move marital savings before filing. Reduce child support exposure. There it was. The center of the whole thing. Not a rumor, not a feeling, not paranoia. A plan. Daniel and Claire had not just been meeting for coffee. They had been building a future with money that still belonged to the marriage. They had been calculating what Evan would cost Daniel. They had been preparing a version of Marianne that would make Betrayal easier to sell. Marianne made 3 copies, one for herself, one for Patricia, and one she placed in a plain envelope at the back of the filing cabinet. By then, she had learned something about the trail. You never keep the only copy of the truth in one place. By the time Daniel realized Marianne had gone quiet, she was no longer waiting for an apology. She was waiting for the right moment. For the next few weeks, Marianne lived 2 lives inside the same house. In the morning, she packed Evan's lunch and reminded him about assignments. She drove to the dental clinic and balanced accounts in the same neat handwriting she had always used. She bought groceries. She answered Daniel when he asked where the clean towels were. At night, she scanned documents, bank statements, school emails, calendar records, credit card charges. The PDF that had slipped out of the printer, like the marriage itself finally confessing. She wrote down dates, not feelings. Dates. Daniel canceled driving Evan to practice on May 9th. Daniel charged lunch at the cafe on May 9th. Daniel withdrew $400 on May 10th. Daniel told Marianne she was imagining things on May 11th. Patterns look different when you stop making excuses for them. Soon, Patricia's office found more. The apartment deposit was not a one-time mistake. Daniel had paid the first month and security deposit for an apartment Claire was using across town, and the money had not come from some private account he owned before the marriage. It came from the joint account. Their account. The same account Marianne used to pay the mortgage, Evan's school expenses, insurance, groceries, and everything else that kept their life standing. Then there was Brooks Advisory Services. Daniel had never mentioned it. It was a small LLC. Quiet. Plain. Easy to miss if you did not know where to look. Part of Daniel's annual bonus had been routed there as consulting income, or at least that was how Daniel wanted it to look. But Patricia's financial consultant saw the timing almost immediately. Money went out after Daniel started meeting Claire. Money moved before Daniel planned to file. Money was being tucked away while he told Marianne they needed to cut back. That was the part that almost made her feel foolish. She remembered standing in the grocery store, putting back the better cut of meat because Daniel said the budget was tight. She remembered telling Evan they would wait until next month for new cleats. She remembered Daniel sighing over the electric bill like the family was barely holding on, all while he was paying for Claire's apartment. All while he was moving money into a business Marianne did not even know existed. Claire was not simply an ex who needed closure. She was not a lonely woman leaning on an old friend. She was helping Daniel rehearse a life after Marianne, while Marianne was still inside the marriage, doing laundry, paying bills, and making sure their son had clean uniforms. Daniel's plan was ugly, but it was not sloppy. He would keep the calm father image. He would make Marianne look reactive. He would ask for 50-50 custody, not because he had suddenly become the more present parent, but because it could lower child support. He would move money before filing. He would let Marianne walk into court confused, hurt, and unprepared. And then he would call that fairness. But Marianne was not confused anymore. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and watched her from across the kitchen. "You've been strange lately," he said. Marianne kept wiping the counter for another moment. Then she folded the towel and placed it beside the sink. She walked to the small desk near the hallway and pulled out one bank statement. Not the whole folder. Just one page. She laid it on the kitchen table. "I know about the apartment," she said. Daniel looked down at the page. For the first time in months, his face had no prepared expression. "What apartment?" Marianne did not answer that lie. She had learned not to chase every insult to reality. Instead, she placed the printed PDF beside the statement. "I know about the child support plan." Daniel's mouth tightened. Then his voice changed. It became controlled, offended, almost wounded. The voice he used when he wanted to sound like the injured party. "You went through my private business." Marianne looked at him. "No," she said. "I went through our marital money." The room went quiet. Daniel picked up the statement. His eyes moved across the numbers. But he was not reading for truth. He already knew the truth. He was reading to find out how much of it she had. That is the difference. Guilty people do not ask what happened. They ask what you can prove. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said. Marianne nodded once. "Maybe not," she said. "That's why I hired Patricia Grant." Daniel's eyes lifted. There it was. Fear. Small, but real. He tried to cover it with a dry little laugh. "You look crazy in court," he said. "You've been acting crazy for months." Marianne gathered the papers and slid them back into the envelope. "Then bring that version of me," she said. "My attorney will bring the records." Daniel thought the courtroom would be the place where Marianne fell apart. Instead, it became the first room where the truth finally had a microphone. When the first hearing came, Daniel walked into court dressed like a man who had spent the morning practicing how innocent should look. Pressed shirt, clean shave, careful expression. The kind of tired eyes people use when they want sympathy before anyone hears the facts. He did not look like a man who had been moving money behind his wife's back. He did not look like a father who had questioned his own son's paternity to reduce what he might owe. He looked calm, controlled, almost wounded. That was always Daniel's gift. He knew how to make his cruelty look like patience. He presented himself as a devoted father who had done his best in a difficult marriage. He said Marianne had changed. He said she had become suspicious, controlling, and obsessed with Claire. He said he wanted stability for Evan. He said he wanted peace. Peace. That was the word he kept reaching for. He wanted 50-50 custody because Evan needed peace. He wanted a fair financial split because both parents needed peace. He wanted the court to understand that he had stayed calm while Marianne had become emotional. It was a clean story, a useful story. And for a few minutes, Daniel seemed almost comfortable telling it. Marianne sat quietly beside Patricia Grant and listened. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her face gave away very little. That was not because she felt nothing. She felt plenty. Anger. Grief. Disgust. A strange kind of sadness for the man Daniel had pretended to be, and the family he had been willing to turn into paperwork. But she did not interrupt. She did not roll her eyes. She did not whisper under her breath. She let him talk. That was Daniel's first mistake in court. He thought Marianne's silence meant there was nothing behind it. He had made that mistake before. Patricia did not rush either. When Daniel finished painting his version of the marriage, she stood with the calm of a woman who had seen too many men confuse a patient wife with a powerless one. She did not call Daniel cruel. She did not call Claire a homewrecker. She did not waste the court's time with outrage, because outrage was exactly what Daniel wanted from Marianne's side of the room. Patricia started with the money. Not feelings. Not betrayal. Money. She brought up the joint bank transfers first. The small, repeated withdrawals Daniel had tried to keep under the level of alarm. 200 here, 400 there. Cash moving out on Fridays. Transfers to an account Marianne had never been told about. Then came the apartment deposit. Claire's apartment. Paid from the joint account. Not from some private savings Daniel had before the marriage. Not from a harmless side fund. From the same marital account Marianne used to pay the mortgage, buy groceries, cover Evan's school expenses, and keep the family's life moving. Daniel stared forward. He did not look at Marianne. That told her enough. Then Patricia moved to the credit card statements. The cafe where Daniel said he had never had lunch. The restaurant he had never mentioned. The hotel bar he could not explain. The florist charge from a Tuesday when no flowers had ever reached his wife. One charge by itself could be explained away. Daniel had been counting on that. A business lunch. A work meeting. A misunderstanding. A coincidence. But records have a way of becoming louder when they stand together. One charge was a question. 10 charges were a pattern. And Daniel had left a pattern. Then Patricia introduced Brooks Advisory Services. Daniel shifted in his seat. It was small, barely visible to anyone who was not watching closely. But Marianne saw it. She had lived with that man for 23 years. She knew the difference between discomfort and fear. Patricia explained the timing.
Part of Daniel's annual bonus had been redirected into that small LLC. The account had been created quietly. Income that should have been part of the marital picture had been moved before the divorce filing. Money out.
Money hidden. Money made to look smaller than it was. Daniel's attorney tried to frame it as routine financial planning. Something Daniel had been exploring for work. Something informal. Something not meant to mislead anyone. Patricia let him finish. Then she brought out the PDF. Post-separation budget, Daniel and Claire. There are certain moments in a courtroom when nobody needs to raise their voice. The room does not need drama. It does not need a speech. It only needs the right document placed in the right hands. Patricia read the title first. Then she read the line about the bonus transfer. Then the apartment deposit. Then the sentence Daniel must have believed Marianne would never see. Move marital savings before filing. The room seemed to narrow around those words. Then Patricia read the next line. Reduce child support exposure. Daniel's face changed. Only a little, but enough. His attorney tried to soften it immediately. He suggested the document was a draft, a private note, an informal estimate. Maybe something taken out of context. Maybe something Claire had misunderstood. Maybe something Daniel never intended to act on. But some words do not need much context. Move marital savings. Reduce child support. Claire's apartment deposit. 50-50 custody request to reduce monthly exposure. Those were not the words of a confused husband trying to keep the peace. Those were the words of a man planning how to leave his wife with less and call it fairness. Daniel had walked into court hoping Marianne would look like a woman driven mad by jealousy. Instead, his own paperwork made him look like a man rehearsing betrayal. Then Patricia turned to Evan, and that was where Daniel's clean little story started to come apart even faster. He had claimed to be the calm parent, the stable parent, the one Evan would naturally choose if things were split evenly. Patricia did not argue with emotion. She answered with records. School emails showed Marianne responding to teachers. Medical records showed Marianne attending appointments. Dental records showed Marianne handling follow-ups. Calendar entries showed Marianne driving Evan to baseball, to checkups, to parent-teacher meetings, to everything that fills a child's life but rarely gets applause. Text messages showed Daniel canceling on Evan on days that matched charges near Claire's apartment or the cafe. Work emergency, he had said. But the records told a different story. That was the thing Daniel never understood about ordinary responsibility. It leaves a trail, too. So does neglect. Then Patricia submitted the DNA result. Daniel was Evan's father. No surprise. No twist. No hidden scandal for him to use. But Patricia explained why the request mattered. Daniel had raised the question only when divorce and support became likely. He had taken a 15-year father-son relationship and tried to place a question mark over it, right when money entered the conversation. It was not proof that Marianne had done anything wrong. It was proof of the kind of man Daniel was becoming when he thought responsibility might cost him. A father does not need a lab report to remember who he tucked into bed. A husband does not accuse his wife of betrayal just because he is trying to discount his own. According to Patricia, in their state, the court could consider hidden assets, misuse of marital funds, and efforts to distort income when deciding temporary support, attorney fees, and financial orders. She did not promise Marianne everything. She had never done that. Court is not a revenge fantasy. It does not hand someone a crown because they suffered. It does not always deliver the kind of clean justice people imagine when they are hurting. But sometimes, if the records are clear enough, the truth does enough. And in Marianne's case, it did. The money Daniel had moved was pulled back into the marital estate for consideration. The apartment payments for Claire were treated as marital funds spent outside the marriage. Brooks Advisory Services did not protect the bonus the way Daniel thought it would. His income was reviewed more carefully, not through the smaller picture he tried to create, but through the fuller one he had tried to hide. Child support was calculated from a more accurate view of Daniel's money, not the version he wanted Marianne to believe. Not the version he wanted the court to see. The real version. His request for 50-50 custody did not disappear completely. Court does not work that way. But it no longer looked clean. It no longer looked like a father simply wanting time with his son. It looked strategic. It looked timed. It looked like a man using parenting time as a financial shield. The court saw that Marianne had been the primary parent in practice, not just in words. She had handled the school, the doctors, the schedules, the emotional labor, the parts of parenthood Daniel only seemed to value when they became useful in a legal argument. Marianne was allowed to remain in the house with Evan temporarily. Daniel was ordered to contribute support. He was also ordered to cover part of Marianne's attorney fees, because hiding money and forcing the truth to be dragged into the open had made everything more expensive than it needed to be. And Claire. Claire did what people like Claire often do when the fantasy starts coming with invoices. She faded. The woman Daniel claimed needed him so badly suddenly did not need him badly enough to sit beside him through consequences. She did not want the court dates. She did not want the financial scrutiny. She did not want the ugly reality of a man who had promised her a clean exit and delivered a public mess. That was the quietest part of the karma. Maybe the sharpest, too. Daniel walked into court hoping to leave Marianne with doubt, fear, and less than she deserved. He walked out without the hidden money protected. Without child support avoided, without the custody story looking pure, without Claire standing firmly beside him, and without the image he had worked so hard to build. Empty-handed did not mean the judge stripped him of every legal right. It meant the plan failed. That mattered more. He did not get to keep the money he tried to hide. He did not get to turn Evan into a number on a spreadsheet. He did not get to make Marianne's patience look like weakness. He did not get to call her unstable and then ask the court to ignore the records she had calmly preserved. For months, Daniel had believed Marianne's silence meant she was breaking. He never understood it meant she had stopped begging a liar to tell the truth. Karma in real life is not always loud. It is not always a screaming match. It does not always come with applause, public shame, or some perfect, dramatic ending. Sometimes karma is much quieter. Sometimes karma is a judge reading the exact sentence a man thought his wife would never find. After the divorce, Marianne did not become rich. She did not buy a bigger house. She did not stand in front of a luxury car and smile for people who never knew what she had survived. She did not need to prove she had won by looking untouched. That was not her kind of victory. She moved into a smaller townhouse with a narrow kitchen, one quiet driveway, and enough peace to finally sleep through the night. The place was not impressive. The hallway creaked upstairs. The laundry area was too small. The kitchen cabinets needed painting. The back patio could barely fit 2 chairs and a plant. But Evan had his own room. The custody schedule was clear. Child support arrived on time. Every bill came in Marianne's name, and somehow that did not scare her the way she thought it would. It steadied her. It reminded her that her life belonged to her again. There were no hidden calls at dinner. No phone turned face down beside a plate. No man stepping outside to whisper under the porch light. No one calling her paranoid because she had noticed the truth before he was ready to confess it. Peace felt strange at first. Too quiet. Almost empty. Then, slowly, Marianne realized it was not empty. It was safe. She kept working at the dental clinic. Then she started taking small bookkeeping jobs in the evenings. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that made for a dramatic comeback story. Just steady work. Real work. The kind of work that rebuilt her, piece by piece. One invoice. One paid bill. One clean bank statement. One calm morning at a time. That is how most women rebuild after betrayal. Not in one beautiful moment, not with music swelling in the background. They rebuild while making dinner, while answering emails, while folding towels in a house where nobody is lying from the other room. They rebuild in the quiet, and the quiet is where they start recognizing themselves again. Evan noticed before Marianne did. One evening, they were eating at the small table near the window. Nothing special, just dinner on a weeknight. Evan looked up from his plate and said, "You laugh more here." Marianne almost denied it, out of habit, out of the old instinct to smooth things over. But she stopped herself. She smiled a little and said, "I think I breathe better here." That was the truth. And for once, the truth did not need defending. A year later, Daniel texted her, "I made mistakes. Claire is gone. Can we talk?" Marianne stared at the message for a long moment. There was a time when those words would have cracked her open. A time when she would have read them again and again, looking for the apology inside the excuse. A time when Daniel's regret would have felt like proof that she had mattered. But now, the words only felt late. Not powerful, not tempting, just late. She did not answer right away. Not because she was trying to punish him. Not because she wanted him to suffer. Because she was not afraid anymore. For years, Marianne's silence had been survival. Now, her silence was peace. She turned off the screen, placed the phone face down, and called Evan down for dinner. That was the real victory. Not Daniel losing Claire, not the court exposing his plan, not even the money he failed to hide. The real victory was that Marianne no longer had to live inside someone else's lie. An ex is not always the danger. People have pasts. People make mistakes. People carry old names, old heartbreaks, and old chapters with them. But a husband who hides the calls, hides the money, hides the apartment, hides the divorce plan, and then calls his wife unstable for noticing the smoke. That man is not confused. He is choosing betrayal. Boundaries do not destroy marriages. The people who keep crossing them do. And calm is not weakness. Sometimes calm is the only reason the truth survives long enough to be heard. Sometimes the strongest thing a woman can do is not scream, not chase, not beg, and not explain herself to someone committed to misunderstanding her. Sometimes the strongest thing she can do is gather the records, protect her child, walk into court with clean hands, and let the truth arrive on paper. If this story reminded you of a red flag you once ignored, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories about betrayal, divorce, custody battles, financial consequences, and quiet justice, subscribe before you go. Because sometimes the past does not ruin a marriage by coming back. Sometimes the marriage ends because someone kept opening the door.